Thanks be to Elion, I had more than a few steps ahead of the invaders. Though they saw me run into the throne room, the foul goblins will not know that I placed the scepter sword in the hidden vault below the altar." Mawmoo looked up at Pawps and rubbed her eyes. Pawps nodded, placed both hands on his staff, leaned over, and made his eyes as wide as he could to continue reading the final words on the ancient scroll. But alas, they must have found the secret passage behind the throne. I can hear them now, entering the catacombs. My time is short, and I know that you who read this are now charged with reclaiming our holiest of weapons. I pray to Elion that you will make haste in its recovery, and afterwards take back our temple and the land it sits on." Pawps leaned back up and looked at Mawmoo, whose eyes were already on him. Then they both looked at Garrick. "Well, my friends, what do you think?" smiled Garrick uncomfortably, as he ran his right hand over his dark brown hair. "The scroll is very old. It is tattered. It is only by the grace of Elion that it has survived this long," replied Pawps, walking away from the table. The old man looked out the window at Onyx, who was laying out in the grass. "What the author says, the fact that he wrote the message in haste, goes with the legend I know." "The one we know and believe," added Mawmoo, nodding at her husband. Then she looked up at Garrick. "The real question is, what do you think?" asked the old woman. "What do I think?" asked Garrick in surprise. After Pawps joined his wife in looking at him, the mercenary gazed back down at the scroll and cleared his throat. "There are so many versions of the scepter sword legend. The only dispute, really, is how it was lost to us." Garrick stopped for a moment, remembering all the times his mother had told him the legend when he was a boy. After there began to be much infighting between the good races of Denaria, Elion, in his wisdom, united us all under one man. The scepter sword was given to this just man to rule, the man who Elion would call the king priest. Seeing Garrick pause, Pawps continued. "The scepter sword was not just a sign of rule, however. It had 3 holy stones in its hilt that made it an almost unstoppable weapon. However, someone close to the king priest betrayed him and took one of the stones out without him knowing. With the weapon devoid of its unlimited magical power, the king priest's betrayer, who had already secretly allied with the goblins, opened the holy fortress gates for the green monsters to invade. An invasion that, if successful, would not just leave the betrayer as the new ruler, but the goblins would no longer be held at bay." After Pawps's voice trailed off, Mawmoo spoke. "We do not know who betrayed the king priest, but the legend my grandfather believed to his death was that it was the king priest's scribe who was able to hide the sword. He was with the king priest almost daily." "Which is why this scroll was written during the surprise attack," finished Garrick. "But what of the 3 holy stones? The sword is no better than any other blade without them." "Ah, Garrick, you are right. Where are the stones?" asked Pawps, tapping the table twice. Then he patted his chest and continued. "When I journeyed, not just the human kingdom lands, but the Dwarven mountains, and the Elven forest as well, I found that many of the clerics of all 3 races believe that in the end, the 3 stones that were in the hilt of the scepter sword were actually split among the 3 realms somehow after the invasion." The room was silent for a moment. Garrick looked at the old innkeepers, knowing that even though there was not much proof other than a tattered old scroll unrolled on the table before them, that both Pawps and the big Mawmoo believed the legend, and not just some of it, all of it, and would till they were in Elion's embrace. After Garrick grabbed the ancient scroll and rolled it up, he looked at Mawmoo. The old woman's face was contemplative and serious as she looked out the window at Onyx, still resting in the grass. It was almost as if she were in another time and another place. When he started to put the scroll back into his pack, Mawmoo turned to him. "Garrick, my grandfather told me many things. He taught me many things," said Mawmoo. "But there were 2 things he told me on his deathbed that I will never forget. 2 things that I will always believe." Then the old woman stopped for a few seconds and continued. first was that he loved me deeply." Garrick and Pawps watched as the big Mawmoo fell silent again. "And the second?" prodded the mercenary. The old woman looked up at Garrick and the tattered scroll in his hand. Then she finished, her voice filled with confidence. "That the high priest has one of the scepter stones."